Hi guys, welcome everybody to today's webcast. It's now the month of Halloween, autumn is in full swing, and I don't know about everyone around you, but people around me, nobody can believe how cold it is, nobody can believe how dark it is, but we are keeping in good spirits here in the Customer Success Network by getting a fantastic set of webcasts to wrap up the year for you. Today, I'm over the moon to introduce you to Rob Redman from Adobe. Rob is a dear, dear friend to the Customer Success Network, and Adobe is a very close partner of ours. As the Adobe Customer Success Best Practice Lead for EMEA, Rob is responsible for leading initiatives that up-level, scale, and standardize the way CSMs add value and drive adoption and partnership for customers. Rob is incredibly passionate about customer success and is well known for constantly finding ways to help the CS team maximize impact for Adobe customers. You may have seen Rob at several of our events, and we are excited to welcome him today as he talks us through the customer success skills framework he developed at Adobe. Surely, many of us have been in a situation where our customer success team has started off with maybe 1, 2, 3 people, and then together with our business has grown rapidly and exponentially. As our team expands into various verticals, areas of expertise and seniority, it is important to begin understanding our people's capabilities in order to begin drafting career pathways and allow our team to grow and develop. Adobe's experience in developing a customer success skills framework has allowed their team to learn multiple valuable lessons in this area. Today, we're fortunate to have the chance to hear about some of those lessons from Rob's top tips on designing, implementing, and evaluating such a framework. The webcast is hosted by the Customer Success Network. Join us if you haven't already. Go to customersuccess.network and hit the Join Us button. My name is Morika. I am a part of the network and a Customer Success Manager at Beamery. We always try to get this webcast to be as interactive as possible, so please just post your questions in the Q&A box. We'll have 2 poses, one towards kind of the middle and one towards the end to answer your questions. We're also going to have some questions for you throughout today's session, so feel free to chat in the chat box and get the conversations moving. The conversations will continue on our workplace community where I am currently streaming this session, and you'll be able to also view it in future. So without losing any more time, Rob, I'm so excited to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Well, thank you for such a warm welcome, Marika, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for the Customer Success Network for inviting me to speak today. So as Marika said, I'm Rob Redman. I am the Customer Success Best Practice Lead for Adobe. And my role is primarily to standardize and up-level the customer success operations within EMEA and globally. I've been at Adobe for just over 7 years, primarily as in customer success, as a CSM and management, and now in the leadership team. And I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that I'm very passionate about, what I believe to be the single most important asset to any organization, and that's our people. Companies have a responsibility, right, to invest in their people so they feel equipped with the right skills to do their job effectively, right? We know that. But how do we identify the right skills for sharpening, right? How do we, when we roll out training, how can we make sure we're measuring it effectively? And as this comical image shows, what is the impact on our business if we don't upskill our teams? So these are questions that I plan to tackle today in one approach that I used at Adobe, which was to assess and identify and close the gap on skills within our customer success team, and that was to use an internal skills assessment. So, but I guess before I start jumping in, I'd love to just get a bit of a sense from the group of how you identify skills within your business. So using the chatbot, just to get us the brains going, if you wouldn't mind asking this question, like what successful methods do you use to identify customer success skill gaps in your organization? Okay, great. Seeing a few things coming now. Annual reviews, shadowing is a good one. Yeah, good. I mean, I think one thing immediately what I'm seeing is there is no silver bullet, right? It's very much a multi-pronged approach, and much of this I'll talk to a bit later, but just good to get a bit of a sense of your approaches that you take. Okay, good. So as those keep coming in, let me move on. And to demonstrate the importance of developing our people skills, I'd like to start with PwC's latest global CEO survey that asks around 1,300 chief execs across the globe the questions that keep them up at night, right? And one of the key messages from this report is that global CEOs are working harder to bridge the gaps in their own people capabilities, right? And they recognize the need to focus more on retraining and upskilling. So what is the impact on a business if we don't keep our people trained and upskilled? Well, in that same report, CEOs shared a breakdown of ways that their businesses were impacted by a gap in people capabilities. So if we firstly look at business impact, the lack of innovation was top of the list, right, linked closely to the inability to pursue new market opportunities and missing growth targets. But it's not just about business performance that's impacted. Like if we think about the importance of customer centricity in our roles, the quality standards of the customer experience is also impacted. And so this type of research can help you get the attention and support you need if you feel your organization is not focused enough on people development. So what is the best approach to addressing capability gaps? Right? You had a good few ideas that just came through, but to answer that question, I turned to LinkedIn's 2019 Workplace Learning Report, right? It looks at the most popular methods used by learning leaders on closing the skill gaps and increasing learner engagement. And the report revealed that the #1 method used by talent developers for closing skill gaps is to run an internal skills gap assessment. Right? So this is amongst all the other methods of all the ideas that you just shared in the chatbot, right? These are, meetings with senior managers and observations, monitoring complaints, shadowing is a really good one that was mentioned, reviewing KPIs. But it felt that this method was, in the 2019 report, the most popular. And not just for identifying skill gaps, but the research felt that it was the more robust measure to demonstrating the impact of learning programs as well. Okay, so now that I have set the scene a little bit on the importance of this topic, I'd now like to share just how I approach the design and execution of a customer success skills assessment within Adobe. And with all of these types of presentations, it's not a one-size-fits-all, right? There's going to be parts of my approach that don't resonate, that you may not agree with, but hopefully I've designed this presentation in a way that you can pick and choose what works for you. And I've broken it into 3 sections. Firstly, when is the right time to run an assessment and how you get the right sponsorship and buy-in to launch. Secondly, the focus around the actual design of the assessment, personalized to the role of the customer success manager. And then thirdly, most importantly, how we can start to act on the insight to close the gap in our people skills. And as Marika said, we'll take a pause at chapter 2, just for any questions, and obviously questions at the end. All right, so let's get started with how we sponsor and promote the skills assessment. And it starts with what I've called here, spotting the signals, right? What was the compelling event that led me to run a skills assessment? Well, firstly, like many of you on this call, I'm sure, the CSM role is evolving, right? Adobe continues to go through significant change, and customer success is at the heart of it, right? The profile, the skills, the expectation of a CSM within Adobe is very different to what it was a few years ago. And so as a result, we were kind of observing some inconsistencies around the way that we were managing and engaging our customers that we needed to address. Now, secondly, we're very fortunate to have a real diversity of skills and experience within the team, right? But it led me to think that we really got good visibility of our talent, right? Who are the silent assassins? You know, do we have the right skill set assigned to our customers? So that was another kind of observation picked up. On the third point, you know, we have very clear customer success KPIs set from the top at Adobe, and they're typically focused on those hard metrics, right? We all know retention, adoption, risk. But I felt that there's a bit of a blind spot around how we measure the kind of the softer metrics that are the key to driving the right behaviors in the team. So, you know, within training, from a training perspective, we're very lucky at Adobe. Much of our training, though, is being built to accommodate a a very wide cross-section of roles. It would be sales and solution consulting, as well as customer success. So what I call here the snowflake training is good because it scales effectively, but there wasn't really anything that was targeted to particular skill gaps because we didn't really know what those skill gaps were. And then finally, with a growing team, as you'll know, like there's a healthy appetite for progression, right, which was great. But I think the path in getting there wasn't as clear as it could have been. Right? There were some CSMs that felt they were perhaps stronger than they were. Others probably didn't understand the opportunity that was out there. So that was another observation. I'm sure there are more, but these are just a few signals that you might think about within your organization. And so once I spotted these signals, the next step was for me to get the right support and the buy-in from leadership. And typically when you do that, you want to start with the benefits, right? They're going to go, what's in it for me? What's in it for my team? What's in it for Adobe? And so these were the three main kind of benefits that I focused on when positioning the importance of running the assessment with the team. So number one, it was the first time that we would be able to shine a light on where our gaps were, not just at an individual level, but actually as a collective. And so that would allow us to develop those kind of more targeted training programs that would accelerate learning and drive better performance. And if you're lucky to have learning and development budget, then naturally it allows you to be a bit more targeted and focused on where that budget goes. So that was the first one. Secondly, around driving continuous improvement, right? It was just about putting a stake in the ground around where our performance is now versus what we plan to do and repeat the exercise early next year. But I spent a lot of time positioning this with the team, with the managers, this concept of the growth mindset, right? The scorecard wasn't really there to trip anyone up. We weren't going to penalize anyone if they scored themselves low, right? This is just an honest account of their performance and an opportunity for them to call out where they needed help. And naturally with that, allow them to shine if there are high performers. So that was the kind of the second point. And that then leads into the third point around setting up for future success. The great thing you'll see around the assessment is that it's a great snapshot now, but it helps to inform where your team needs to go in the future. And I'm sure a lot of you might now be thinking about 2020 planning. It's definitely informing our succession planning, right? Thinking about where do we want the team to be going in the future? And that goes in terms of future training needs, but also from a hiring perspective. Like if you know that there's a gap in the team, if you're lucky to have headcount, you can bring in that talent based upon addressing that gap. So that was another way of positioning this. So let's move on to then the design and execution of the assessment itself, right? So once I'd had that kind of approval from the organization, it was time to start designing the assessment. Now I had a really good idea of the kind of questions that I wanted to ask, but I wanted to make sure the managers felt involved. So I almost kind of created a definitions doc of all the questions that I wanted to ask, what the expected output was, but throwing that into SharePoint gave the managers an opportunity to feed into that, right? They're going to know the pain points in their teams. They're going to know their organization, their products better than me. So I gave them plenty of time to feel involved. And so as a result, once I had that, I was able to then translate that into what you can see here, an online survey tool. I use Typeform. There's plenty out there. And that then allowed me to start the execution piece. The questions were designed to capture both qualitative and quantitative feedback, right? And you'll see later in the results why that's so important. We all know that surveys are a bit of a pull on our time. So I wanted to make it no longer than kind of 10 to 15 minutes to complete and really set the vision that it'd be something that I would be repeating long-term to allow us to see as an organization how we can improve. Okay. So let me just quickly whiz through how we designed the assessment. It was made up of kind of 4 components: core competencies, engagement and processes, tools for success, and then the products that your organization looks after. Now, from a core competence point of view, these are, last year, well, about the year before me running this, I led the rollout of our global CSM competencies, right? These are the skills and behaviors that we felt represented an Adobe CSM. So these were behaviors like communicating value or interpersonal awareness, team working was another one, objective handling. So naturally, it was good to feed those directly into the assessment. But the trick that we did here was not only create an assessment for our CSMs to assess themselves on these competencies, but for their managers to give their perspective as well. And that's what you'll see in the results a bit later on. Engagement and process, this was really, as we all know, the daily CSM framework that our CSMs work to, right? So these were things like, their ability to assess themselves on renewal readiness or customer health reporting or success planning, okay? Tools for success was really focused on how those tools that drive productivity, right, on a daily basis. So whether it be as basic as MS Excel or collaboration tools like we use Teams, but there's Slack, Jabber, as well as tools that we have within Adobe that help us to accelerate a customer's path to value. So there was an assessment piece around that. And then finally, the products and solutions, which obviously is going to be very specific to your own organization. We didn't go too deep here, right? I wanted to really, the question was your ability to articulate the business benefits of certain products and solutions. We didn't want to go any deeper just because we could just spend one assessment on the depth of our own product knowledge, right? So we kept it at that level. Okay, so before I move any further, I just wanted to take a quick pause. Any questions so far?
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for a super exciting first part. I'll tune in with some of the first questions here. And also just some things that I've been thinking about, just listening to you kind of speak through the inspiration and the design of the skills framework to begin with. Supposedly, we all know Adobe is quite a large organization, but customer success never really exists in its own balloon. We always collaborate with loads of other different departments, and I suppose everybody kind of uses their own ways to assess skills across their organization. So did you collaborate with any other departments on designing this, and how did you seek their assistance? How are they able to help?
It's a good question. As you say, I think we had I guess I had my hands full with we were lucky that we've got roughly 140 CSMs within EMEA, right? So I think it was very built very specifically to that role. I would say that since we've launched our assessment, we've had many other teams now looking to do the same, right? So our solution consulting team are now in the process of replicating the template, as is our sales team. So at the time, I felt there wasn't a need to rely too much on other departments, but I do feel that from a competencies point of view, I mentioned a few of them around team working and account planning. I think there's a lot of transferable competencies that we could easily, combine across other post-sale teams, right? So I think there is definitely an opportunity that we could call out, but I'm hoping that this first pilot would be something that would encourage other teams to follow suit.
No, that's amazing. And we have a question from Tony here, which is kind of follows up on this one. Two parts to this question. Firstly, how long did you take to design the questionnaire? And secondly, did you collaborate with anyone in your organization or outside to get the right questions in it?
Good question. So how long did it take me to design? I think I gave a good solid month in terms of that definitions collection, right? So I started with a list of questions that I felt were good representation of getting the most out of the survey. And I would say that probably from my own experience, but I would say at the time, I guess I did look at a variety of different sources to help me think, where am I going to get the best insight from this, both within Adobe and outside? But I wanted to as I mentioned, I wanted to make sure the managers felt involved. So I gave them plenty of time, a good month. In terms of actually the design within Typeform, it didn't take me long. I use Typeform a lot, so it was really easy to do. So from that side, that was the fun part of just kind of creating the questions, getting that ready. But the key was absolutely making sure that it was validated with the rest of the wider organization. And I apologize. What the second part of the question from Tony was?
The second part of the question was, did you collaborate with anyone in your organization or outside to get the right questions in it?
Yes. So again, I think just collecting feedback from the CS managers, from the leadership. Interestingly, it was the first time we did it in EMEA, so our other regions haven't done it yet, but they plan to do so. But I did consult with a few people overseas just to, again, they knew what my plans were. The other individual that I did work with is our enablement team. So they were very bought into the fact that we were doing this because they were as much interested as we were, because they knew that the results of this would inform their planning, would make a real impact on all the stuff that they do. So again, if you have an enablement team within your organization, then getting their support and buy-in was really helpful too.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a question from Sophia coming in. With the survey that you sent out, did you ask people to rate themselves, or how are the questions formed to get an understanding of their training needs?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So it was a self-assessment, right? So it was, and you'll see later when I start to show the results, the nature of those questions. But in summary, for a given topic, for a given competency or tool or product, it would typically be part of two forms. Number one is rate your expertise 1 to 5, so simple scaling piece, and it would give more context to the question, obviously. But then there's a question of capturing a bit more insight around what do you need to improve your expertise in that given product, and that allowed us to capture a lot more rich information that added more color to their feedback. So again, hopefully the second part of the presentation will show you how that insight was really bubbled up to give us a lot more insight on what we were doing. But yeah, that was how the survey was structured.
Thank you for that. And you touched lightly on how you managed to get management buy-in and what were the things that you kind of put a big emphasis on when you were communicating that to the larger Adobe organization. But for, say, someone, one of our viewers decides to implement that over the next couple of weeks at their organization, what do you think would be the biggest barriers that they might face? What do you think they need to be prepared for when they put that idea forward and then trying to get buy-in for it?
I think there's a real, I mean, look, it's a put on people's time, like any survey, right? There's that element. There's also a piece around, do we have the right resource to execute on the results? That's a real key. So, collecting the insight is relatively quite easy, right? People are very open to kind of, this is where I need more help or need pain. Where it's very key is they want to be heard. They want to make sure that, right, I've spent my time, I've shared my feedback. Now, what's Adobe going to help? How's Adobe going to support me? So I guess that's something to be prepared to have the right resources that gives that reassurance of how you're going to address those capability gaps. So that's probably one thing. I can't stress enough of getting involvement from all the levels. And as much as what I'll talk to in the second part, as much as the actual audience themselves, right, getting them to feel involved and being part of the solution drives better adoption, as opposed to coming back with this kind of magic list of things that they've now got to do. Like, helping them feel part of the process is really good. And however senior you can get, right? I think one thing that I was very fortunate was that I had the leadership back in, and we ran an all hands where I had all of the customer success team there. But again, really focused on, this was not a scorecard. This was an opportunity to help them be the best versions of themselves, right? To help them develop as a CSM, to have that growth mindset, and really to set the vision of Adobe Customer Success as being a world-leading customer success organization. And to do that, we have to start with ourselves, of where we can get better. So I think there's a lot of messaging there that might help you as well to get that buy-in you need.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I think we're all very excited to move over to the next part and get into the how of the matter. So I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Keep those questions coming in. All right, so the last part is broken into two. Number one, the interpretation of the result, and then how we're acting on it. So as I just mentioned, the first thing I did once we had the results, and roughly speaking, I must have given a good 3 to 4 weeks to allow the team to complete all the responses. Right? So that was the time frame. Could have given a bit more, but I felt that was a reasonable amount of time. And obviously, with a lot of survey tools, you can start to see the results coming in straight away. So it was a really healthy response. the first thing I did was present the insight back to management. Right? I wanted them to make sure that they weren't, there wasn't any blind spots there that they felt, that they should be made aware of before, most importantly, sharing back to the team. So as I said to you, Marika, that sharing back to the team, one, to make sure that they felt listened to, but also I wanted them to feel part of the solution, right? Like I came up with recommendations that you'll see in a moment, but this session that I ran where we presented back the insight was an opportunity for them to, number one, validate the recommendations, but two, come up with other ideas of how, as a group, we could address certain skill gaps. And that seemed to work very well. It was a good response. So the next few slides are just snippets from a much larger presentation that I could spend hours taking you through, but don't worry. But just to give you a sense of the format that I took when you collect this results, how you can then almost bring it to life and share the insight back to the business. Just in terms of a sense of response rates, so we had 113 CSMs complete. And if you know Adobe, we have different parts of the organization. So we have a much larger proportion of digital experience CSMs, but we also had other teams, digital media and Adobe Sign. And in addition to this, we obviously had all the managers complete a separate assessment on behalf of their teams as well. Okay, so that's a sense of the scale that we work to. Now, with any piece of work like this, I think it's important to provide a bit of an exec summary and just being very transparent. These were our scores, right? So this was a collective roll-up of our scores across the different components. And as I mentioned earlier, this now gives me a stake in the ground of going, right, how can I work on that product score? Like that I want to move the needle there. I want to move the needle on, up-leveling the engagement and processes. And this is again across the whole of the group. But remember, as I'll show later, you can slice and dice this at an individual level, at a team level. So it really gave a good benchmark to certain teams and certain individuals. So let's look at the competencies. So as I mentioned earlier, we have about 15 global competencies that we feel represent the behaviors of our CSM. So you can see a few I mentioned here: objective handling, renewal readiness, self-enablement. I'm sure you can all relate to these competencies. These are the ones that we defined a year prior, globally signed off, which is a fantastic result. And so this is the collective view, both from a CSM's perspective, but also from a manager's. So it gives a really powerful insight to, number one, where collectively both CSM and manager feel there is a gap. So your eyes, I'm sure, drawing towards the value selling piece, right? We're changing our charter. Like we know and we now recognize there's an area of improvement there around how we skillfully negotiate, deal with those commercials. The same with self-enablement, the irony of that one, given the topic today. But, again, our CSMs are so hardworking. Are they taking the time to take a pause, step back, and focus on their own personal development? So that was another piece of good insight that for the manager certainly to focus on. But it allowed us to see as a group where we were very strong, right? Relationship management, objective handling, customer advocacy. These are the traits that you feel should be almost a condition of employment when it comes to CSM. So this was a good view that we had, and all the insight, like any insight, you want to provide some commentary to help bring it to life. The same kind of format when it comes to almost benchmarking certain tools, right? So this was the different tools that we surveyed. Everything as basic as Excel, PowerPoint, but to those more Adobe specific tools. So immediately I was able from the results to say value maps, right? Value maps are such a powerful tool within Adobe, yet look how underutilized they are. So immediately I was able to prioritize enablement around the value maps, using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And again, just to help make sure that we've got a good understanding of where our team's expertise are on these day-to-day tools that we sometimes take for granted. Like Excel is always a funny one. I always felt embarrassed asking the team about their ability to use Excel, but we all know on this call, having that in the back pocket, sometimes you get data given to you in a very unstructured way. Those little skills can save you a lot of time when you need it. And there was a question earlier, I think, from Tony around, the nature of the question. So it was, number one, rate your ability from 1 to 5, but it was asking the question, what do you need to improve your expertise with that given topic? In this case, strategic business reviews. And I'm a big fan of word clouds, and I'm quite visual. So I was able to then almost classify that feedback and to really show the themes that we were seeing. So immediately you can see access to kind of those gold standard templates was something that the team needed. Access to power was another real kind of area that they needed help with. Shadowing. So, you know, pivoting off the back of this feedback, you'll see later that there's certain programs and targeted training that we're doing to address these, but it just gave, it removed any subjectivity, and it really allowed us to be very focused in what does the team need to up-level the quality of their SBRs, as one example. Okay, and this format was for every bit component, whether it's a product, whether it be a competency, whether it be a particular process of some form. Nothing more powerful than just lifting out the sentiment from the CSMs. Some of it I had to kind of, you know, have to be careful with. Like people were well behaved, but you know, again, it gave them an opportunity to feel quite, you know, to air their frustration in one area, but also just gave some really good practical advice. You know, within Adobe, you know, we're a big growing organization, right? So we have to build training programs that fit to scale. But as you can see here, CSMs were clearly, you know, getting quite tired of stop training by movies, right? We need to see things in action live when it comes to our product training. And someone mentioned earlier about shadowing. Again, that was a really good bit of insight, shadowing other CSMs that are strong in a particular area. Okay, so again, this was just a few snippets that I took away, but if you're approaching and interpreting this, I think this is perhaps a good template you could use. And then finally, in that presentation back to the team, I didn't want to go empty-handed. So I had some ideas of how can we address some of these capability gaps to keep things really simple. So, you know, this was the time where I shared those recommendations, but took their feedback. Would this help address those skills? Any other ideas that we had? So building out recommendations per category in this format that I did. There was a laundry list of other things, believe me, but I felt these were the priorities based upon effort and impact. Okay, so the next part I'm going to be talking around is like, what are we doing? Like, how are we acting on this insight to drive improvement? But again, this is a big question I always have, and I ask myself quite regularly, what successful methods have you developed or that you use to help engage learning content within your organization? So again, please turn to the chat pod, share what works for you. Is it getting executive sponsorship is always a popular one? You know, is it incentivization, which seems crazy because I think people shouldn't necessarily be incentivized to learn, but please kindly share any thoughts around this question. Okay, so thanks, Marika. Our enablement team makes suggestions for courses they think success and sales should take. Yeah. Any others coming in? I mean, computer-based training, is that popular? Lunch and learns are great. Love that idea. Yeah. Yeah, teamwork on courses. Good. We do a lot of role play when we've got the time. We really try and do some buddying system, again, to try and make that content land. We're very email heavy at Adobe, which again, I think it's still a very popular channel, as we all know. But I think that sometimes you have to mix it up now, certainly in the age that we're in, with so many different channels that we can connect with the learners on. So, okay, a few ideas. Making learning fun, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's some really cool research around if you make the learning fun, then you know the adoption of that learning content just is really, really significant. So yeah, thanks Rick. Good on the role play again. Agreed. I think it just brings it to life a bit more and brings it back to your own relevant kind of world in a way. So okay, good. So well, look, let me move on to what are we doing now to act on this information? I kind of ran the assessment in early July. So, you know, we still got a lot to do, right? We've got a lot to plug the gap, but let me just share 3 examples that I've already put in place since the assessment's gone live that demonstrate what we're doing. So number 1, manager coaching dashboard. So I'll go through each of these individually. That's the first. Secondly, what we call the customer success SME.net. A kind of revamp of that community. The SME is the subject matter expert community. and then I'll talk to what I call this Tools Tuesday. Again, hopefully a simple template that you might want to consider too. Okay, let's start with the manager coaching dashboard. So the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, is we have all this fantastic rich insight. Got to get it into the hands of the managers, right, to act on. And so I'm not exactly a whiz on Excel, but I think I was good enough to be able to stitch together this insight into one simple form where, as you can see at the top, the manager can then toggle between their team members or by team, and it will update the results based upon their responses. One thing I did do on the top right, as you can just about see, is I did bring in the more harder metrics, just to give some context. So if it was Rob Redman, they could look at my results, both qualitative and quantitative, but they could also put in context, all right, how's Rob doing in terms of his retention rate or the number of strategic business reviews that he's running? Again, this is just to equip the managers to have a coaching conversation, right? That's part of their job. So I think this was certainly a very popular first step to arm the managers so they can start acting on this insight, as I mentioned. If we kind of dive into some of those components I talked about. So this is the kind of the competency comparison. And this was really quite popular across the managers because a lady called Muriel Legoff, who's happy for me to share her name. She is our head of customer success in our Southwest region. She told me that every one of her managers now is using this in their one-to-ones. Right? They're using it to have a very honest and frank conversation around where do we need to set expectations and realign on competencies. But even more impressive, they're using it ongoing so that when that CSM is perhaps carrying out some sort of exercise or meeting their customer, the manager's saying, well tell us what competencies are you working on to improve, like whether it be account planning or communicating value, right? So, and this is exactly why I wanted it to be used, to almost hinge into those habits. So that's definitely helping in that sense. The other bit of feedback I've got from the managers is that this insight is now being directly fed into their IDPs, their individual development plans, which is again, really useful way that this is being fed, that the manager will then talk to where are you not necessarily underperforming, where do you need the most help? Oh, value map's right. Well, then that's part of your IDP. Let's task you to go and learn the value maps and put it into practice for one of your customers. So that's a really bit of common feedback that we're seeing from the managers around it's informing their team's IDPs. Okay, so the next way we're using it is very much the results of the assessment was identifying CSMs that have that kind of strong subject matter expertise, right? In fact, the results of the assessment, you had some CSMs literally shouting out saying, I'm an expert in Excel, I want to help. Like, call me out, like, I want to help my peers, as well as others that are very, based upon their experience with certain products, whether it be in our world, like analytics or personalization, optimization, right? So we'd already done a lot of the hard work through this assessment by ring fencing those experts. And so the next step was really about giving them a platform to help them share that knowledge with others. And this is where this SME community comes into play. So we kind of create these, using Microsoft Teams, dedicated channels for each one of those individuals that have a level of expertise based upon, as I mentioned, whether it's their product, whether it's a particular engagement, even a competency. Like we have SMEs now around competency of social selling or how to do effective account planning or EQ. So again, very scalable. It's, as the assessment asks for, it wants to connect with other people that have those talents. And so again, this is something that's working well for you, whether it's Teams, whether it's Slack, whether it's anything else. I think this is a really effective way, and we're seeing some good results from that. Okay. And then finally, probably the more tactical, but again, relatively easy to set up, is I looked at those tools results, and I just felt there's a really good opportunity of, number one, taking those SMEs and looking at those individuals that are very strong in a particular tool, but then, as I said, giving them an opportunity to kind of share the more tactical kind of best practice guidance to others. So I had this kind of Tools Tuesday idea, 30 minutes, not a pull on people's time. And in those sessions, we just let that individual typically a CSM, share with the rest of the group their own tips and tricks of what's working well for them. It's resonating really well. In fact, so much so that the team are just sending me through a list of other tools that they want to continue throughout the rest of the year and next, whether that be Salesforce or some of our creative tools. So again, 30 minutes, really sharp, really simple, and just a few screen grabs of just from some of those sessions that are recorded and stored for onboarding, all sorts of other benefits. But again, the session on Excel was very popular. The recent one on SBRs, again, I think, sorry, not SBRs, sorry, delivering presentations and using the advanced features of PowerPoint was also very popular. So lots more to come there. Okay, so I went through that quite quickly, but listen, I hope that was useful for you all. I guess just to wrap up, like, it doesn't matter how big or small your company is, whether you're a startup or a big multinational company, right? If you invest in your people, if you believe in them, and you provide them an opportunity to learn and grow, then you'll have a very committed, hardworking, and motivated team. And so from today, Marika, I'm right in saying that these slides will be shared if you felt that it's something you wanted to repurpose. If you wanted to get in touch with me to learn more about the approach, please do. My contact details are there. And I'm more than happy to share the assessment in type form with you to do one of two things. Right? I'd love to get your feedback. Number one, just to use if you wanted as a template, you might want to lift and create your own version. But perhaps we could even think about running this through the community, right? So imagine if we were to all agree upon an assessment that we felt represented everyone's team, right? But imagine running that through the community and really being able to assess, our European customer success practitioners in one hit. I think that would be quite a powerful bit of insight that I'd be more than happy to support as well. So that's me done. I'm sorry if I finished a bit earlier, Marika, but yeah, any questions?
Amazing. Thank you, Rob. I think we're going to have questions, and so finishing early is not a problem at all. The first few reactions that I'm seeing here from Emma, for example, or Ricardo, your presentation has been absolutely great. I myself am, although I know what we're talking about, I'm equally impressed every time I look at that. I think it's mammoth effort, so thank you so much. People are actually quite excited apparently to see the Typeform survey. So as Robin did mention, we're going to be sharing this on the workplace community. We'll do this fantastic initiative. I think that's going to give us such a good insight and actually have a little visibility into the skills and the self-assessment of the customer success community altogether. And we do have a few kind of questions in here. So we talk about learning and how various people learn at their companies. A lot of us will do external training, even computer-based, through things like Coursera or Udemy or anything else, or people would be sent out to conferences or do any other formal learnings. Is that something that you did at Adobe as a part of that, or something that you do regularly?
So the question, Marika, is do we kind of use a bit of a mix of different? Yeah, we do. I mean, that's something that I challenge myself on as well. But yeah, we're lucky that we have a lot of computer-based training. I think, as I said, that scale as well. But I think listening to the assessment, I feel that there's a time and place for that. Mm-hmm. And that certainly when it comes to product knowledge, you want to see it in action, right? There's only so much you can learn from watching a few videos. One of the things actually, and I slightly answers the question as well differently, but definitely have a look at that LinkedIn talent report, because there was a section on there around what are the top skills that, across their sample, they felt were the most important going into 2019. And creativity was number one, right? So there's obviously an angle of making sure that people know their products and know their roles. But there's some of those real core skills. I think we can't forget those, and the ability to give CSMs, to challenge CSMs in a creative way, to apply this stuff, similar to what Ricardo mentioned earlier around, making it as more real world as possible in role play. I think we know that lands a lot more effectively than giving them a 20-minute video to watch around the same topic.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. diversifying learning is great because everybody learns their own way. So that's spot on. Thank you for that. We have another question with regards to your Tool Tuesday sessions. We also sometimes invite guest speakers, like the product team, for example.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it has huge opportunity to scale that way. I think we initially it was to embrace the skills we have in our organization, right? To embrace the talent that we have. That was the goal. But admittedly, one of those individuals we had on Tools Tuesday was an external speaker, right? It was someone, and when I say external, they were within another organization. But 100%, if you've got people connected outside of your organization that can come and talk to you about a particular skill set that resonates well, then I think that definitely it's just providing that platform. We all know that sometimes the 60-minute meetings, I think you lose people. It feels like that 30-minute mark, just enough to keep their attention, to keep it, really quite actionable and concise. So long may it continue, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Amazing, thank you. Emma here is asking, do you know what the uptake was on the SME program for one-to-one SME advice? For example, one CSM reaching out to a subject matter expert for specific advice. Emma says she's seen this implemented before and the one-to-one part really wasn't picked up. The only way it worked was through lunch and learn sessions hosted by the SME.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's hard. Like, I think, again, the Teams platform is helping us to, again, allow people to go to a particular channel, which we would hope is manned by some of those CSMs, and they direct questions to that. So everything they're doing is visible to everyone. So if someone has a question around a particular product, they post that through the team site. The answer to that might also help others with the same question. Frankly, I don't have visibility from a one-to-one perspective, but you know what? But I would say I'm confident to say that when I have people come to me about particular questions around tools, the SME list of people, those superheroes, it's the first place I go. I go, have you spoken to Jo, because she's really strong in this area, or have you? So I think even that visibility is just helped me to almost triage responses a bit more effectively. But it's hard. Like, I think in a busy environment, it is hard. And in Adobe, there are so many different ways and channels that people can connect. We actually struggle to land on a single communication platform, because you can contact people through Slack or email or all carrier pigeon, all sorts of things. But Teams is the one that we're trying to standardize a bit more.
Definitely. Another question was, was this a mandatory assessment, or was it on an opt-in basis? The training after, the training as well as the surveys?
So the survey we never forced anyone. We had 113 CSMs complete it out of 140 in the group. This is where the managers played a big part, and our leadership played a big part. So, and there was really good appetite, but we never forced anyone to do it. But we position it in a way, as I mentioned earlier, around if you can get the messaging right to feel that if you don't complete it, you're missing out. And actually, there's that kind of the healthy side of other people doing it to encourage. But no, we never forced anyone to do it. But I certainly was very much pushing the managers to help get the response rate. And in terms of those trainings, like Tools Tuesday is completely optional. So it's for people, and that was always positioned to say, if you're like a 5 out of 5 for Excel, you don't need to turn up to this. But if you want some help, then you can. And, we get on average about 50 or 60 CSMs that are so far turning up to these Tools Tuesday sessions. So far it feels it's working.
Amazing. We have a very specific question coming here from Tony. Thanks for your presentation. So we are an IT company in the SaaS B2B space with 4 customer success managers, $8 million ARR, and a target of 1.5 million for 2020. Do you think it's worth it doing the whole skill gap assessment for such a small department or not?
Why not? I mean, look, I don't mean to say that flippantly. I suppose, I think one of the advantages of assessment is it scales effectively. So the manager of those four, I'm sure, will have a good, strong understanding of their CSMs, kind of skills and assessment. But I think it goes beyond just knowing that. It's about putting, as I mentioned earlier, that measurement piece of putting a stake in the ground and maybe working with those four to say, right, we've now really, across all the skills that we feel you need as a CSM, now we can work together on the three things that can make you get better, right? And put them it just makes it perhaps a bit more of a structured approach. You may not need as many questions. You can make that assessment yourself, Tony, but I would definitely encourage it. And as I mentioned, another benefit was it helps to, I guess, set expectations and define the type of competencies that you would expect from CSM. So whether it's 4, whether it's only 2, it will just give them clearer guidance that if one of those 4 felt that they were better than they maybe were, or actually were underselling themselves, maybe this assessment exercise could help them. So yes, is a short answer, but maybe you want to look at the assessment first to see whether you need as many questions or tailor the questions that are suited to the IT company's proposition.
Great. And Tony, you have a chance to do that. I will post a sample survey as well as the slides on our community, so you'll be able to see what you want to be inspired from, or you want to modify to apply it to your particular use case. So I'm thinking, I know that you have applied this to all of your existing kind of customer success managers body, but how about people that are just starting with you? Is that something that you would probably apply to assess where they're starting from and then use perhaps in a development plan for a new start?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in terms of baking it into onboarding, is that kind of thinking? It's interesting because we actually had a few CSMs that came to me and said, I've only been at the company for a couple of months. Do I need to do this? And, obviously I think the scores for some more established products and tools would be relatively lower. But I think the competencies resonate in any role, right? Well, in any organization, if you feel that, customer centricity is as much as important in any role. So yes is the short answer, but we haven't baked it into our onboarding program, but I think that's a really good idea. And something that, again, I know that I think it's been very useful for the new starters because it gives them something to go, we've all been there when you start a new organization where you ask yourself, am I where I need to be? Like, am I progressing? And actually having that every 6 months might go, wow, actually I've gone from a 2 to a 4 in a given product because I feel a bit more comfortable. So I think that's good. The other thing just to mention as well is, we'll obviously repeat this in January, and if you'll have me back, I'm happy to share some of the results. But we'll do the same with our managers. And I think that's the other thing that I'm working on at the moment is our manager competencies, because again, our managers play such an important role around. If they can't coach effectively, then some of this learning and training may not hit the mark. So that's another thing that if your organization has managers that you could apply this to any role. So I think, that's what we'll do. Amazing.
I think from what you're saying, that framework can be applied to so many parts of the customer success organization. And it's very exciting to see that we are catching you in such an amazing time where you continue to apply more and more. So of course, we'll invite you back to tell us more about it. And to tell us what you learned from your experience. Hopefully by that point, some of our community members would have tried it as well, and they'll be able to share and continue the discussion. I can see that we've managed to answer all of the questions that we have had for today. So at this point, as we mentioned a couple of times, the discussion will continue on our workplace community. Both slides and survey will go up over the next few hours or so. The recording will be available at a later stage also. Big thanks to everybody who joined us for your participation and for very insightful questions. It's amazing to see that this has been such an interactive session. Rob, to you, it's been so amazing to have you. Thank you for your time and for sharing that valuable insight with us. And thank you once again to everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your week. We'll see you in November.
Thanks, everyone.
See you later.